you.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Got one more?
Okay, you're the Dominiques,
Yes.
and you must be Jerry.
Yes.
Okay. Have you been to a Board of Equalization before?
Yeah.
Let me explain the process we go through. Every year the assessors are required to bring properties up to market value according to Idaho Code. I know everybody gets frustrated because value sometimes is related to taxes, depending on if one category inflates more than another.
Right.
And can't really do anything about except sympathize with they will worry about taxes and inflation, things like that, because we see that too. But what we're here to do today is find out, we'll take the evidence they've got that shows they've established market value, give you the chance to have any other evidence of sales that will back up your claim that it's worth less than that. Sure. We'll try to come to a conclusion. If you're unhappy with that, you'll have 28 days. We'll provide you with forms to file an appeal to the State Board of Tax, which comes here, much like this setting in the fall. And it'll be a kind of a de novo trial where you can bring new sales. If you look around and say, oh man, I know this house over there's that, but you don't bring any proof to it, we can't use it, but you can get it and come there. Now, so to begin with, need everybody involved, we'll put you under oath. Use your right hands. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. We do that because these are what they call a quasi-judicial, which is not court. That's why we record it and keep a record of it.
Okay, perfect.
So this house is on 144 5th Street,
Yes.
and you think the value should be $300,000 to $350,000. They're defending a value of 456,640 feet. First, we'll let you explain the data that you've got or proof that you think makes it a lower value.
Sure. I'll go through. I had a few bullet points I wanted to bring up. First, I just want to talk about the pricing model used in the appraisal process. It seems that a replacement price is used or a cost approach, assuming cost for new construction. And so that is not reflective of older homes, and it also overestimates the tax value, and it's not reflective of the actual sales value of the home. So they're using a model that prescribes the highest possible value for a home of that square footage as if it was brand new, as if it had, or if it was older, if it was brought completely reconditioned up to a brand new condition. So I think the model is fundamentally flawed to start with. So I think that is an inappropriate model to be using to create market value. So I'll just throw that out there to start with. Another point, just factual accuracy. I have some documentation I included showing that the house was built in 1928, not 1950 something or other that was stated. And so the condition of the home is much older, has single pane windows. Basically, many sections have not been redone since 1928 when it was originally built. Square footage is the next point. The actual square footage I'd like to bring into contention. They're proposing a value of 3,452 square feet. Actually, that is just based on square footage, is my understanding, or what their estimate or what they have on record. In actual fact, when you actually look at usable square footage or livable square footage, the ceiling comes into play. So only areas of the house that are at least 6 feet high, and I think that's been recently changed to 7 feet high, is actual livable space. And the top floor of our house has, I don't know, it's like a 45-degree slope on it probably. So a substantial portion of that, even though it's in and it's heated, that's not usable square footage for a living space because the ceiling is far less than 6 feet. It goes all the way down to 0 on the outside. So the whole entire top floor is not usable square footage. Some portion of it is. And so I've got different documentation showing different square footage. Using the 6 to 7 foot square foot, height rule, it should be no more than 2980 square feet of adjusted living space would be one point. Another one would be that based on our purchase appraisal, when we bought it in 2011, the gross living space was identified as 2,365 square feet, which is considerably less. That's probably because, and that was done, we got from our real estate agent that we've been using recently. This was based on an evaluation that was conducted in '99 when they actually listed the house for sale. That's when they actually would go out, the real estate agent, take a measuring tape out, they'd actually measure the square footage, and they would give the actual living space for the listing. The county's never been out, nobody's come by, I don't even think a drive-by was conducted when the assessment was done. They haven't been doing any evaluations or drive-bys. We did have a discussion, and I brought up some points that we talked about, but just basing it based on a new house that's kind of irreprehensible, And this is an aside, but I know a lot of the commercial properties are grossly underrated and a lot of underappraised. And so you got old homeowners that have been here for a while that are paying a disproportionate amount of the taxes because we're getting our home values appraised based on a new home. So we're paying the same rate that somebody's buying a brand new house for. That's completely inappropriate. Plus the tax burden is not being equally shared across residents and commercial properties. And then that's drastically different over different counties. But I'm sure Jana Mowers she's a broker in the state, and so she could provide a lot of information on, different counties as well as our county itself. So I know that's not directly related, but that's definitely a factor. Janet, the real estate agent, pulled some very recent comps, and so her value came down considerably lower, over $100,000 lower than what was done by the county, and that doesn't even consider a lot of the conditions inside the house because it's well used. It's livable, but it's well used. It's not a new house by any stretch of the imagination.
Are those comps included in this?
Yes, she included her comps in here and broke it down some by square footage. And so the price per square foot that she was coming up with for the comps ranged from $118 to $168. I certainly argue that we're at the lower of that end. But in addition to that, we pulled some of our own comps, but they got a copy of it. So these are recent sales going back to 11/20 and 12/21, all in the Pros edition. So the issue is there's not a lot there are some houses with similar square footage, but not a lot. Most of them are significantly smaller. And when you compare those prices to the significantly smaller houses, the price per square foot is much higher than the larger houses. And so the comps that we pulled, they range from $86 a square foot to $126 a square foot. And those are all, 2,500, 2,700, 2,800, 3,000 square foot houses. So those comps that we pulled are certainly a lot more representative of our specific house because they're comparable square footage. And so if you take the lowest, which was $86 a square foot, which I believe is probably closer to the value of our house, because it's not in pristine condition, it hasn't been completely redone. It has a whole heating system. We have ice on the inside of our windows in the middle of the winter. So it's not a new house by any stretch of the imagination. So if you take the square footage into consideration and you go through and you look at the different cost values, and even at 3,371 square feet, we're looking at a value at $86 a square foot at $289,906. And I'd argue, based on some of the other documentation, including our appraisal in 2011, It showed the livable square footage is 2,365 square feet at $86 a square foot. The appraised value should be $203,390. And so that to me would be, that is definitely the low end, but that is much closer to the value of our house than the top end.
Question,
Sure.
where did you get these comps? Are these actual sales?
Yes.
No, this was just Zillow.
Okay, this is Zillow.
That
Okay.
is Zillow. The comps from the real estate agent.
Are these ones
Because
here?
they're quite different than the ones from the real estate agent.
Yes, yeah.
These are actual sell prices that you found.
They're
in
the ones
Zillow?
that were on Zillow that were.
That show the sold price. Those
No,
are,
that's it was taken off the market, so
Oh,
this
they
is
were
what was
listed at those
first, yeah,
prices.
listed at that price, so no, I can't guarantee that those are the sold prices. So you
Okay.
might not wanna consider those.
I'd like to consider. So, yeah, even looking at the ones that our broker, put together, you're looking at $118.52 a square foot on the low end. And that was a very recent sale. These are actual sales prices. I think these are probably sold.
Do they include land or is that just?
No, that's the total. That includes the land and everything in there. So that's the square footage of the house on the land as well.
Is that this sheet?
Yes, yeah. And so even at $118.52 a square foot. So even if we use 3,371 square feet, which I dispute is actually that much. That's 397, so that's pretty high still. But, I think the square footage probably is definitely lower. I mean, it's at least 2,980. The 2,365 off our appraisal is a documented square footage off the appraisal. So to me, that would be as viable as any other documentation that we have. So if we use 2,365 square feet at 108, at $118, that's $279,000. That is even.
2090.
On her analysis, they have you approximately 3,500 square feet.
She took that off of the county records, so that's the only number that she had access to. That was it.
I don't know how they measure there, but I'll be able to explain that, but the others are taken off the county tax records, so her analysis is using apples for apples. The cost per square foot is one thing, but I'm looking at the actual prices of the solds.
Yeah, that's the middle road.
Yeah, 351 at 2,980 square feet.
Yeah, all of those are smaller than your home, and the lowest one was 397 up to 450 on actual sales for a smaller home. Is that correct?
Yeah, she tried to go in the same area,
Right.
same roads.
Which is what they do, but
They're comparable. I mean, I'm arguing that the square footage that the county has on file is the accuracy of that as well.
well, I'm looking at the square footage by the same standard that she looked at on the approximate square footages of the 4 sales.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand.
So, for example, the first one was 3,300, yours 3,500, this sold for 410. One for 3,000 square foot, sold for 450, one for 2,700 square foot, sold for 450. And then the 31 sold for 397. Am I reading that correct?
It looks like 3,354 square feet on the 397 on the first row, 611 11th Street.
Well, so like the list price and sold price, okay. Well, that hurts and helps you a little. Some of them are down under, but then you have the one that somebody must have bid up was listed for 450 and sold for 470.
2 of them are higher than the list.
Yeah, and I would argue that those are all ready for sale and assumed to be, you know, relatively pristine condition or better condition anyway. I mean, we haven't gone through any lengths to.
Okay, yeah, that helps looking, that's why I'm asking questions. So if I look at the 3150 square footage based on the same comparison, here's a 35 is sold for 415, one for about 2,800 sold for 470, one for 3,000 sold for 445, and one for 3,354 sold for 397, correct?
Yeah, that's what it looks like, correct.
I'm sometimes slow, so I have to have somebody explain it. Okay, let's go over your sales, and now I'm gonna have some questions for you to maybe look at on some of theirs.
Okay, yeah. So we talked on the phone, you know, we called in, you know, like everybody has been calling about the value increase, which has been absolutely crazy. I did go over things with him just to make sure that the information we had was correct. As far as the year built, I'm just going based on what documentation we've had. I don't know how we change the year built unless we actually have like some kind of builder's something. But we do have 1951 as it being built, and the square footage is just based on living space. So again, we didn't have it in an estimated value, which means that at some point an appraiser has been out and got actual measurements. I don't know when that was.
So you had a 1950s year built?
Yes, that's what we have in our system is 1951 is when it was built. So
I own two homes in that general area. They're pretty well established and built.
By then.
yeah, but like I said, I don't know how we change that unless we have some kind of actual, you know, documentation for that. So that's what we pulled sales on was, and so the sales I have are actually older than the 1951, if that's correct, you know. And square footage wise, we're going by the 2242. We're not including the basement, so we're just doing the main floor and the upper floor. And so again, based on what we have, you know, a full upper floor. And when I talked to you, he said that was, you know, completely finished. The changes that we did go over, he said he does have some leaking in his basement, and so I put a 5% adjustment on that for probably cracks in the foundation. And then he said that his fireplace doesn't work anymore, so I did remove that. And then it said we had a second kitchen sink picked up. He said that is no longer there, so we removed that. And then his heat source, I think we had it at hot oil, like
Hot air,
yeah.
but it's actually oil.
Right, it's not updated, it's just the old
Right.
boiler.
And I did actually try and change the heat to boiler, but that actually added $4,000 value for whatever reason. I was like, that doesn't sound right. So I ended up just changing it to forced hot air, which is more correct. It just didn't change the value all that much. So with those changes, I mean, before the changes were made, his dollar per square foot was coming in at $195.45. And with the changes that I offered and we discussed, it actually brings it down to $183.53. And so with the sales that we're pulling, based on what they sold for and their dollar per square footage, the top three sales you see there, and then on the spreadsheet with the homes are what we found most comparable based on size, look. They're all in the Crow subdivision. And so if we just take those top three comparable sales that are what we felt was most comparable to his home, it's actually coming at $231. So that's still, you know, his dollar per square foot is still coming in lower than what we're showing the sales. Yes, some of them are smaller, but again, that shows people are still willing to buy homes, you know, for X amount of dollars, even for a smaller home, and their dollar per square foot is still coming in the 200, 250 range.
What condition do you have on this home?
On his home, we have it in a good condition, which means, you know, since 1950s, it's had, you know, it's been upkept. It's, you know, I did do a drive-by, I did do an updated photo. I didn't see any obvious signs of wear and tear on the outside or significant, you know. So it is in a good condition, but again, that, you know, I haven't been on the inside, so I don't know exactly what's going on.
With windows, with single pane windows, you know, with other icing up the winter, would that justify it good? Seems like that.
It could, again, it depends, because people are still willing to buy home sight unseen, or, you know, even single pane windows, even stuff that aren't keeping frost out, so they're still willing to pay, you know, a lot of money just for a house, even if it's not in an older condition.
Generally, for our good factor, we will consider improvements that have been made. And certainly there's probably original things, there's probably possibly flooring or exterior cover that may need to be replaced. Generally, a good would constitute well-maintained or improvements. So even in a 1951 or 1920, what did you say? 28. While there may be some factors that are needing to be replaced, maybe windows is something that would need to be replaced. I'm assuming from either whether 1950 or 1 or 28, there have been other significant improvements throughout the year in addition to just the maintenance of the house. So average would be a home that is in need of severe repair. I don't want to say severe repair, but in need of a lot of repair. Fair would be one step above, condemned, so in need of severe repair, lots of problems. Average would be it's in need of a lot of repair, and then good is well maintained, maybe some improvements. Get into very good, now you're talking maybe a little bit of updating of kitchens, exterior covers, things like that, and excellent is when you have full remodels. So at a good, it's basically accounting for improvements that made through the year and maintenance.
So when they say you're valuing it on the new home,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not
Or not,
correct?
no.
Could you address that a little bit, help us understand, because this realtor seemed to imply that's how you do everything.
So, yeah, we're just looking at comparable homes based on size, on age. So again, if what we have is correct with the 1950s, I was pulling homes around that time, and the most comparable ones were actually older, significantly older.
So we do actually use market sales. We don't use a local cost alone. We do utilize a local cost to determine new construction. Beyond that, for our older homes, we do look at the local costs and we factor in depreciation. The depreciation is based on actual sales of homes. So in this instance, I believe, and I had a chance to look, in the 1951 home is receiving 10% depreciation or 7% from. That's a 7% increase from what it was last year, and the 1920s would be 10%. So it is factoring in, I don't want to say it's 7% depreciated from the actual cost of a new home. It's significantly less than that, or significantly more depreciation than that, but it is factoring in what homes that age has sold for. So it's not simply based on what a new home is. Your value isn't being compared to what a brand new home that size would cost. In fact, if it were, it would be significantly higher. So
Even current sales, though, I would argue that the vast majority of current sales are brought up to excellent to good condition or excellent condition when they sell them. So
we certainly have sales of homes that have been renovated, as you said, or brought up to current, and generally those homes that have had those improvements will sell for significantly more. We have a tremendous amount of sales that don't have those improvements either, homes that have sold, and literally from, like I was saying, from that fair range that they're in need of, homes that have literally been condemned to homes that have been completely renovated or restored to original. And you will see those sell prices vary depending on the improvements that they've made. But we do account for the condition when we value. So we're considering the condition of the home when it's sold when we're determining that. So we're not going to compare you to an excellent home, a home that's been renovated completely, and we're not going to compare you to a home that's been condemned or in need of severe repair. Just got you in as a good condition, well-maintained homes. We're only going to be comparing you to sales of homes that are also in that similar condition.
What's the requirement for your guidelines for creating for doing that appraisal or for making those evaluations? Because it seems to me that you're definitely weighing it and skewing it more on behalf of a higher value to generate more tax revenue, which seems contrary to what would be in the best interest of the residents who are living here.
I understand your concern. We don't. We actually factor in all of them. We're not giving any more weight to a higher dollar sell than a lower dollar sell. We're using every sell. Now, obviously, the only instances that I can think of when we would disregard a sell is if it was a foreclosure or maybe between family, not an arm's length transaction, but essentially any arm's length transaction that's a typical sell that's out on the market, there's nothing strange about it. We will utilize all of those. Obviously, it may seem that the market is a little inflated these last couple of years,
Certainly.
for a number of reasons, but regardless of the reasons, that has been the market, that has been what we've used. I will say, there was another question regarding the methods that we use in measuring. Every single home in this county, the measurements are taken from the exterior of the home. Obviously, there's certainly an argument to be more accuracy if you measure homes from or homes from the interior dimensions. What I will say is the cells that we've used have also been measured from the exterior. So ultimately, I guess the hope would be, well, if we were to measure yours from the interior dimensions, we may come up with a more accurate or a little bit less square footage, but we would then in turn have to remeasure all of the cells, and ultimately the end result would be all of those would be a little smaller. And again, hopefully the end result would essentially be arriving at the same value. So We have measured it from the exterior, as we have every single home in the county. Ultimately, we don't have the ability to get into every home and measure every nook and cranny. Obviously, we are measuring second floor as it sits, so we're not, if the second floor doesn't, I think in this instance, your second floor doesn't match your first floor exactly. And we have accounted for those instances when the second floor is not following that footprint of the main floor. So that 3,500 square foot is from an actual measurement of the home. It may have been 25, 30 years ago, but it was an appraiser physically appraised the home, physically inspected and measured the home from the outside dimensions. Yeah.
If you were to do an interior measurement, would you discount for a sloped roof, that went to a 0?
Certainly. And we do have those instances. A lot of times we'll see that kind of, when it slopes, it'll go to a closet, and we won't, in those instances when it's unusable space, we won't count for that in the measurement. So hopefully that answers your question. When we're measuring second floor, a lot of times we are measuring interior dimensions because it's impossible in a lot of instances to be able to get that exterior measurement from a second floor. So we're not following the same guideline that maybe a realtor is in saying if it's below 7 feet, it's not usable, so it can't be, that may be like we can't list it as square footage. We find that a lot of times with homes that have bedrooms that don't have egress windows, where a realtor can't list it with a bedroom and a basement without an egress window. We may have it inventoried as a bedroom. You know what I mean? It's not really affecting our value, but there's lots of instances where a realtor may have to follow some guidelines and listing that we're not following that same guideline, I guess. Does that make sense?
I don't know if it makes sense. I hear what you're saying, but I don't know if I agree with it.
Or either agree with it or you might not like it.
Yes.
Can I ask a question back on this?
Yeah, actually, I pushed on this.
Okay, what's your question?
My question, it's difficult to know, looking through some of these images, it does seem like some of them are comparable. I will say this 61111, again, I've never been in the home, but just viewing it on the front of it, it doesn't seem very comparable. And if I remove that cell from your listing, the average comes to 149.34. And then when I take your home and add your land in it and figure the dollar per square foot, which is the same method that you have here, I show that your dollar per square foot comes in somewhere. I have that written. We could probably figure that really quickly. Let me just figure it out quickly, sorry. It came out, 137. So when I add your land in and your total square footage, which is what you've done on your list here. So the square footages account for the basement, main floor, second floor, it's total square footage. So in that instance, yours comes out to about 35 something. You had that number. I apologize. I don't. 3516. So the dollar per square foot, 138.77. If I remove this first cell, this 611, and again, I don't know how comparable it is. I guess my instinct is to remove that as a comparable. The average of the other three comes in at $149 a square foot, and then we're well below that average. It's just that one at 115. So assumption would be that maybe it was sold in a poor condition and has since been remodeled, and that's why you have such a significantly less sell price as it had issues. And that may be indicative of it was on the market a little longer. 18 days doesn't seem like a long time, but certainly in relation to the others, it may be an indication that there were some issues with them.
18 days used to be a wish.
Right. Yeah.
My question is on the adjusted price of the other spreadsheets a little different.
Yeah,
I made the assumption, I want to clear that up, that it got the sales price and the square footage, and the adjusted price is how it would reflect on the house at 144 Fifth Street if they adjusted it to that sale.
Oh, okay. So that's saying if they were using that dollar.
Yeah, if they were using that comparable and adjusted, because if they were trying to come up with a price to list it for, I think that's the way they do it. They say, here's the sale price. This one's smaller, so if we adjust it, the cost per square foot adjust all the other factors up, that would indicate these are the values that we have here on 144.
So in two of those instances, it would be valued significantly more. One right or a little bit less, and then that one that we're
quite a bit less.
questioning the condition.
I just wanted to see if I was reading that correct.
You're probably right. Your guess is his guess. That makes sense.
Hey, anything else?
I guess the only other question I had written down here is, because we may have the year wrong, the year built wrong, should there be additional depreciation added to the home?
So I did have an opportunity to look, the difference in appreciation is 3%. Ultimately, even if we did apply 3% more depreciation, we'd still get into the average. And it's certainly something we can look at. You know, it's something that, I don't know how.
Your comps are 1940, 44, 29, 40,
Yeah.
25.
Well, and the reason we see 3% may not seem like a significant amount for such a gap, a 26-year, 23-year gap. The challenge is that at a certain point, and this is not based on my opinion, this is truly what we find in the market, that at a certain point, those older homes don't sell for significantly less. Now, obviously, a 2010 home is going to sell less than a 2020 home, but a 1950 home may not sell for any less than a 1940 home. So we do actually track, that's how we set depreciation, is based on actual sales and what they sold for it, and based on what as we tracked all those sales in the good condition range, the difference between a 1928 and a 1951 is 3% depreciation. And again, that's ultimately just based on, well, it may make sense that a 23-year-old home that's 23 years older would sell for significantly less. Ultimately, in the market, it doesn't. It's certainly something we want to correct and ensure that we have accuracy. We can, whatever documentation you have that would show that it would be 1928 rather than 1951. I mean, ultimately, we're following that. It may be that once upon a time, 50 years ago, an appraiser changed the age based on a remodel or something.
Right, yeah.
So we would certainly want to correct that. I do think that even in this instance, if we were right at our average, you know, if the average was, regardless of how you look at it, if we took his average at 138.77 and what I feel like the average based on his comps at 149, or what Lisa has where ours have you at 195 and the average is 231, either way that 3% is not going to bring it up to even the average. We're still going to be well below the average.
It's hard for me to not accept, but to believe that older homes are selling for that much. But based on everything we've seen, I don't see any reason to question that your home would be able to sell for that. And that's what we have to determine today, is if you were to sell it, what it would sell for. They've got it priced accurately, and I don't see anything to show that it wouldn't, although it shocks me, you know.
With the market the way it is there any consideration for doing things a little differently, like having caps on increases? Is there any, because you guys know the market's crazy around here. And I mean, it may get worse, it may even go higher. And I mean, how much tax burden should we take?
By the law, which the principle of equalization is put in there for school funding. And that's to make all methods of appraising across the state equal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in an area where there are low values, in the schools, you have an assessor who says, okay, we're going to appraise everything at 50% of market.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that because in the schools, like you cut off the funding, a lot of property taxes are based around school funding.
So it's a state?
It's a state requirement. And if you look at your tax bill, cities and counties have constraints. So our portion goes down if, on these cases where they're so high, they're still going to go up in taxes. But the amount of total dollars we can collect is usually constrained by about 5% new dollars a year. School districts don't have that same limitation. So if your value goes up 100%, they could keep their levy the same, double the amount of money they collect from you. Mm-hmm. But you also pointed out that some of the, maybe that was the last one that pointed out, some of the industrial aren't going up as fast. Right. In our value, our levies go down, theirs actually goes down, and then those of us who own homes, what's even tougher, have rentals in those areas, no homeowners exemption. Right. It's not a fair system, but it's a system that's written in the law. Sure. So, anyway, and I agree with Commissioner Reed, because I'm as the interest rates go up, you start carving off the, people's ability to buy the higher rates, and it puts more demand on houses at this rate. So that's all a first-time homeowner can afford, unfortunately. And pretty quick, I don't know how you're gonna get a first-time home buyer.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, a lot of downsides that, just for recording, I'd be happy to address now. I mean, not least of which is that people on fixed income and people that don't have the ability to accommodate 100% increase in their taxes every year, you're forcing them out of the state and out of their homes because of that.
And we advocate to our legislators on that behalf, because even though we're bound by this, we'd like to help change it so you can address some of those inequities. So, anyway,
Well, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't see any error by the assessor. I would move that we uphold their value.
Second,
okay, and I'll agree, I wish I could make you happier, but that's kind of where the evidence points us.
And I'm shocked at those homes and that. All of us as homeowners, we think, oh, great, our home's worth more than we thought, but does it do us any good? So,
Yeah,
we just,
somewhere, right?
we just end up paying more taxes.
You leave it to your kids who get to pay the capital gains tax or whatever.
Yeah, we can't afford it, then isn't it?
What do you do for a living?
I work out at the site.
Okay, so you got kind of an engineer's type mind for analysis.
Yep. So I think about that. I mean, the other downside, is that, if the city and the county grow into this newfound revenue stream, and 5 years from now, it goes down by 50%, where does that leave all of them?
We don't grow into it because ours only goes up 5% or so. The schools go up, and that's what we worry about. And if they go down, that is tough. So, anyway,
Encourage talking to legislators to do it now before we go to Boise. I'm neighbors to talk to them now before we go to Boise. Leaders and garden part-time.
We don't do that.
Yeah, all of their, and they listen to this. Just trying to spend more time in Boise, sure they ever